Hi Bobcats, it's Miss P. I'm here with my dog Tuck to read to you tonight. I have two things to read to you. Tuck is already falling asleep, so I don't think he needs a story to put him to sleep, but he's here to help us out anyways. So I am going to read you two things. I'm going to read you a poem since April is National Poetry Month. The poem I'm going to read to you comes from the book Something Big Has Been Here by Jack Prelutsky. Jack Prelutsky is one of my favorite authors, and I love the vocabulary he uses. So while I'm reading this poem, I want you to think about all the fun vocabulary and the way he describes things in this poem. And then the story I'm going to read you is connected to the poem. It is a book that I bought while I was in Ireland last summer. And it also reminds me kind of a little bit of what we're going through right now, how we left school so abruptly, and that times are tough, but in the end, everything will work out and this will end and we will be back together soon. So I want you to be thinking about that as well. So lots of connections between the poem and the book, and then the book and what's going on in the world. So I want you to think about those things as well. I hope you enjoy them as much as I'm going to enjoy reading them to you. I miss you all. I miss your smiling faces and your big waves and your good mornings and high fives. So I can't wait to get back to that again. All right. Here we go. So the poem is called I Lost My Invisible Puppy. I lost my invisible puppy when we were out walking today. She disappeared into the bushes and totally faded away. My puppy is not too apparent. My puppy is paler than pale. She tends not to draw much attention. She wags an invisible tail. She wears an invisible collar. Her leash is invisible too. I fear that she's vanished forever. She's totally hidden from view. I miss her obscure little antics, her odd, indiscernible tricks. She chased inconspicuous crickets. She fetched undetectable sticks. My poor, imperceptible puppy is probably still in the park. Perhaps if I pay close attention, I'll hear her inaudible bark. The invisible puppy also has an invisible bark, so how he's ever going to find her. Just a silly poem from a silly author. Okay, now the book. So the story I chose is The Dog from Dingle Who Lost His Bark, and the author is Mark Stratton and Martine Moriarty. Dingle is a beautiful place in Western Ireland, so if you have a chance, you could look up some pictures and maybe find Dingle on a map. Okay, so here we go. There once was a Dingle dog who lived by the sea. His life was fun, he was happy as can be. He liked to bark all day, he loved to bark all night. He was a jolly little dog who barked with all his might. But one fine day, when he was playing in the sun, a great big storm came and ruined all his fun. He ran up the beach and raced across the sand. He was the most scared dog in all the land. Poor puppy. The very next morning, when the storm had gone, the Dingle dog realized that something was wrong. The storm had stopped blowing and the sun was overhead, so he tried to bark, but only whimpered instead. He thought about the rain and how the night was dark. He realized he'd been so scared that he'd lost his bark. He needed to find his bark. Where could it be? He thought that to start, he'd look down by the sea. Down at the water, he heard a moaning song. He thought it was his bark, but he was wrong. It was just a big whale playing in the kelp, so he called out to the whale. Maybe she could help. "Excuse me, Mrs. Whale," he said. "I've lost my bark. I lost it during the storm last night when it was dark. I really have to find it. Where could it be? Oh, Mrs. Whale, can you please help me?" "Why, yes, Dingle Dog," sang the whale in her song. "I heard it in the night, but I could be wrong. There near those rocks I heard a strange sound. Look over there, my dear little hound." "Oh, thank you, said Dingle Dog to the great big whale, and off across the beach he ran, wagging his little tail. Over by the rocks he heard a clicking sound, so he stopped in his tracks and looked all around. There was a tiny red crab clicking his claws by a boulder, so the little dog went over and tapped his tiny shoulder. "Excuse me, Mr. Crab," he said, "I have lost my bark. I lost it during the storm last night when it was dark. I really have to find it. Where could it be? Oh, Mr. Crab, can you please help me?" "Why, yes, Dingle Dog," said the crab, clicking his claws. "I heard it last night. I didn't know it was yours. There on those cliffs I heard such a hullabaloo. I hope you find your bark. I really, really do." "Oh, thank you," said Dingle Dog. "Thanks a lot." And off across the sand he began to trot. Over by the cliffs he heard a screechy squawking. He thought it was his bark, so instantly stopped walking. He saw a white seagull sitting high up on her nest, so he shouted to the seagull his simple request. There's the seagull. "Excuse me, Mrs. Seagull," he said, "I have lost my bark. I lost it during the storm last night when it was dark. I really have to find it. Where could it be? Oh, Mrs. Seagull, can you please help me?" "Why, yes, Dingle Dog," said the screechy, squawky bird. "In the storm last night, that must have been what I heard. There in the cave I heard such a strange commotion. I wondered what it was. I thought it was the ocean." "Oh, thank you," said the dog, with a goodbye wave, and off he walked into the big dark cave. It's pretty brave to be doing that. Deep inside the cave there was a loud echoing roar. He thought he may have found his bark, but he could not be sure. Instead he found a wise walrus who was wrinkled and old, so he asked about his bark, and this is what he was told. There's the wise walrus. "Why, no, Dingle Doggy, I have not seen your bark. I expect you think you lost it last night when it was dark. I know all about the storm that passed in the night. I know of the wind and the waves must have given you a fright." He's talking to him. "But you see, Dingle Dog, you are positively wrong. Your bark is still inside you. It's been there all along. Summon all your courage, search deep inside your heart. There you will find it, and never will you part." "Oh, thank you, wise walrus," said the Dingle Dog with a yelp. "I don't know what I would have done without your thoughtful help." The Dingle Dog thought about what the walrus had said, and he summoned up his courage and he lifted up his head. He thought about the storm that passed in the night and wanted to bark again with all of his might. He ran out of the cave with the sun overhead and he started to whimper, but then he barked instead. He barked at Mrs. Seagull and she squawked back from the sky. He barked at Mr. Crab, who clicked his claws in reply. He barked at Mrs. Whale, who sang back from the kelp. He barked and thanked them all for their help. The Dingle Dog continued to live by the sea. His life was fun and he was happy as can be. He barked in the water and he barked on the sand. He was the noisiest dog in all of the land. That's it. There he is digging in the sand. That's it. So I love that story. I love that story because It reminds me that even though sometimes we feel lost and we feel like we can't say much or do much, that in the end, we just have to have courage and faith and understand that things will get better. And hopefully we can get back to school and be very noisy again with each other. So I will see you soon, Bobcats. I miss you. Bye-bye.